My brother Jake laughed so hard when I showed him my app mockup that he literally fell off his chair. Norma, he wheezed, wiping tears from his eyes, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. You're wasting your time. 3 months later, I was sitting across from Mark Cuban as he wrote me a check for $15 million. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The fluorescent lights in the Denver Public Library buzzed overhead as I hunched over my laptop, sketching wireframes on napkins I'd grabbed from the coffee shop next door. It was 2:30 a.m., and the night security guard had already made his rounds twice, giving me sympathetic looks each time. I'd been coming here every night for 6 weeks, staying until they kicked me out, working on what everyone in my life considered a completely ridiculous idea. My app was called PetPal, and the concept was simple: a social network specifically designed for pet owners to connect their animals. Not just another dating app for humans who happen to have pets, but an actual platform where dogs could have playdates, cats could find climbing buddies, and exotic pet owners could share care tips with others who actually understood their challenges. The idea hit me 3 months earlier when I was walking my rescue pit bull, Rex, through Washington Park. He was struggling socially. Other dog owners would cross the street when they saw him coming, despite the fact that Rex was about as aggressive as a golden retriever puppy. I watched a woman with a tiny chihuahua literally pick up her dog and hurry away, and something clicked. Rex needed friends his size, with owners who understood that breed didn't determine personality. That night, I started researching existing pet social platforms. There were a few scattered attempts, but they were all clunky, focused on humans rather than the animals, or buried within larger dating apps as afterthoughts. Nobody was taking the pet social space seriously, which seemed insane to me considering Americans spend over $90 billion on their pets annually. I'd been working as a junior graphic designer at a small marketing firm in downtown Denver for 2 years, making barely enough to cover my studio apartment rent and student loans. My background was in visual design, not app development, but I taught myself basic coding through online tutorials during lunch breaks and weekends. The learning curve was steep, but I was determined. My family thought I'd lost my mind. My parents, both accountants who'd worked the same jobs for 25 years, couldn't understand why I'd waste time on something so frivolous when I had a steady paycheck. My older brother Jake was even worse. He worked in corporate sales for a medical device company, made 6 figures, and never let anyone forget it. You realize pets can't actually use phones, right? He'd say whenever I brought up PetPal during family dinners. How exactly is a dog supposed to swipe right on another dog? Are you going to teach them to type their bios? Jake's condescending tone drove me crazy, but it also fueled my determination. He saw everything through the lens of immediate profit margins and quarterly reports. The idea that something could succeed by solving a genuine problem rather than just maximizing short-term revenue was foreign to him. My best friend Sarah was more supportive, but even she had doubts. I get the concept, Norma, she'd say, but don't you think if this was a good idea, someone with actual money and connections would have already done it? The technical challenges were overwhelming. I was building everything from scratch: the user interface, the matching algorithm, the messaging system, even the basic database architecture. Every evening after work, I'd grab dinner from whatever food truck was parked outside the library and settle in for another night of coding tutorials and troubleshooting. The matching algorithm was particularly complex. I wanted PetPal to consider not just location and pet type, but personality traits, energy levels, size compatibility, and even the owner's schedules. A high-energy border collie shouldn't be matched with a senior basset hound, and busy professionals needed different playdate options than retired folks with flexible schedules. I was also dealing with the social aspects that traditional developers often overlooked. Pet ownership comes with genuine anxiety. New dog owners worry about socialization. Cat parents stress about introducing new environments, and everyone's terrified of their pet getting hurt or causing problems. My savings account was hemorrhaging money. Between the library's printing costs, developer tool subscriptions, and the countless energy drinks keeping me functional, I'd blown through the $3,000 I'd managed to save over the previous year. My credit card balance was creeping dangerously high, and I was starting to panic about making next month's rent. Jake found out about my financial situation when our mom mentioned it during one of their weekly phone calls. The next day, he showed up at my apartment unannounced, wearing his expensive suit and carrying a folder of what he called reality checks. "Norma, this is embarrassing," he said, settling onto my secondhand couch like he was afraid it might collapse under him. "You're 26 years old, living in a shoebox, maxing out credit cards for some fantasy app that will never make money. Do you know how many apps get submitted to the app stores every day? Thousands, and 99% of them fail." He pulled out printed statistics about app failure rates, development costs, and market saturation. Everything he showed me was technically accurate, but it missed the point entirely. Yes, most apps failed. Yes, development was expensive. Yes, the market was crowded. But nobody was addressing the specific problem I'd identified, and I couldn't shake the feeling that pet owners were desperately looking for exactly what I was building. "Look," Jake continued, "I've talked to some people at my company who work with tech startups. They all say the same thing. If you don't have at least $500,000 in funding and a team of experienced developers, you're wasting your time. This isn't a hobby project anymore, Norma. It's time to be realistic." That conversation haunted me for weeks. Maybe Jake was right. Maybe I was being naive about the challenges ahead. Maybe I should cut my losses, focus on my day job, and forget about Pet Pal entirely. But every time I walked Rex and saw him struggle to connect with other dogs, every time I scrolled through generic pet groups on existing social platforms and saw frustrated owners asking the same questions over and over, I knew there was something there. The problem was real, and the existing solutions weren't working. 3 weeks after Jake's intervention speech, I had my first breakthrough. The basic matching algorithm was finally working, connecting users based on the criteria I'd programmed. I'd recruited 12 friends and coworkers to test the beta version, and their pets were actually having successful playdates. Rex had made friends with a rescue pitty named Luna, and they'd been meeting twice a week at the dog park ever since. The user interface was still rough, and the feature set was limited, but the core concept was proving itself. Pet owners were genuinely excited about finding compatible companions for their animals, and the social anxiety around pet interactions was significantly reduced when owners could chat and establish compatibility before meeting in person. I started documenting everything: user feedback, successful matches, engagement metrics, even photos from the playdates that were happening through the app. If I was going to pitch this to investors eventually, I needed data to back up my claims. The night I decided to show Jake my progress, I'd been working on Pet Pal for 11 weeks. The app was functional, the early users were enthusiastic, and I finally had something concrete to demonstrate, rather than just wireframes and concepts. Jake arrived at my apartment that Thursday evening, carrying a six-pack of craft beer and wearing what I'd learned to recognize as his big brother intervention expression. He'd texted earlier asking if he could stop by to see what I'd been working on, which immediately put me on edge. Jake never showed genuine interest in my projects unless he planned to tear them apart. "All right, Norma," he said, settling into my desk chair and cracking open a beer. "Show me this revolutionary pet app that's going to change the world." A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I'd spent the entire day preparing for this moment, organizing screenshots, user testimonials, and usage statistics into a presentation that I hoped would finally make him understand. My laptop screen displayed the Pet Pal dashboard, showing active users, successful matches, and the growing network of pet connections across Denver. "Okay, so here's how it works," I began, pulling up the main interface. Pet owners create profiles for their animals, including photos, personality traits, energy levels, and what kind of companions they're looking for. The algorithm matches compatible pets based on size, temperament, activity preferences, and geographic proximity. Jake leaned forward, squinting at the screen with the expression of someone examining a particularly puzzling modern art installation. "So it's Tinder for dogs?" No, it's not Tinder for dogs, I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. It's a comprehensive social platform designed specifically around pet compatibility and owner community building. Look, here's Luna's profile. I clicked through to show him Rex's new friend, a 3-year-old rescue pit bull whose owner lived just 15 minutes away. Their profile included detailed information about Luna's training background, favorite activities, and social preferences. See, Luna's owner mentioned that she's great with other large dogs, but gets overwhelmed in big groups. Rex is the same way. Traditional dog parks are chaotic for dogs like them, but through PetPal, they found each other and have been having perfect one-on-one playdates. Jake scrolled through the interface, clicking randomly and shaking his head. Norma, this is exactly what I was afraid of. You've spent 3 months building something that maybe 12 people in Denver might use. Look at this user base. It's tiny. We have 47 active users, I corrected, and we're growing by about 6 users per week through word of mouth alone. I haven't done any marketing yet. 47 users? Jake laughed, not the amused chuckle I'd hoped for, but the condescending laugh that had irritated me since childhood. Do you realize how pathetic that sounds? Instagram has over 1 billion users. TikTok has 1 billion users. You've got 47 people in Denver who probably downloaded your app to be polite. He stood up and started pacing around my small living room, gesticulating with his beer bottle. And look at this interface. It looks like something from 2015. The colors are weird, the fonts are inconsistent, and half these buttons don't even look clickable. Have you seen what professional app development looks like? Have you looked at what actual companies with real funding can produce? My chest tightened, but I pushed forward. The design isn't perfect yet, but the functionality works. Look at these success stories. I pulled up messages from users whose pets had formed genuine friendships through the app. There was Marcus, whose elderly golden retriever had found a gentle walking companion after months of isolation. Jennifer's anxious rescue cat had slowly built confidence through carefully managed meetups with other calm cats. David's energetic Australian cattle dog had found a hiking buddy whose stamina could match his own. Jake barely glanced at the testimonials. Norma, these are feel-good stories, not a business model. How exactly are you planning to make money from this? Are you going to charge people to let their dogs meet? Are you going to run ads between pet profiles? I've researched several monetization strategies, I said, opening another document. Premium features like advanced filtering, professional trainer connections, pet sitting coordination, local business partnerships with grooming services and pet stores. Stop. Jake held up his hand, his expression shifting from condescending to genuinely concerned. Listen to yourself. You're talking about charging people for dog play dates. Do you understand how insane that sounds to someone who lives in the real world? He sat back down, this time on my couch, and his tone became more serious. I've been talking to colleagues who work in venture capital. Do you know what they look for in successful apps? Massive user bases, clear revenue streams, and problems that affect millions of people. Your app serves a niche within a niche within a niche. I felt my face getting hot. Just because something serves a specific community doesn't mean it's not valuable. Valuable to whom? Jake shot back. 47 people using it? Norma, I make more money in a single commission than you could possibly generate from this app in a year, and that's if everything goes perfectly, which it won't. He pulled out his phone and started showing me statistics. 92% of apps never become profitable. The average cost to develop a professional quality app is between $50,000 and $200,000. You're competing against companies with full development teams, marketing budgets, and investors who actually understand the market. Jake paused and took a long drink of his beer, studying my face. I'm not trying to be cruel, Norma. I'm trying to save you from making a huge mistake. You're smart, you're creative, and you could have a real career in design if you focused on legitimate opportunities instead of chasing fantasies. This isn't a fantasy, I said quietly. I've identified a real problem and built a solution that works. Jake stood up again and walked over to my laptop, pointing at the screen. This is a hobby project that got out of hand. Look at this objectively. You're broke, you're exhausted, you're living in a studio apartment, and you're convinced that an app for pet playdates is going to make you rich. Does that sound rational to you? He closed my laptop with a decisive snap. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to shut this down, focus on your day job, maybe take some night classes to advance your design skills, and in 5 years, you'll thank me for talking sense into you. The room fell silent, except for the hum of my refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. Jake finished his beer and looked at me with what I'm sure he thought was compassion. "I know this hurts to hear," he said, "but someone had to tell you the truth. Mom and Dad are too nice to say it, and Sarah's too supportive to be honest. But I care about you too much to watch you waste your 20s on something this ridiculous." He gathered up his remaining beer bottles and headed toward the door. "Think about what I've said, okay? And maybe consider looking for a better job while you still have some savings left." After he left, I sat staring at my closed laptop for nearly an hour. Every point he'd made was technically valid. The user base was small, the interface needed work, the monetization strategy was theoretical, the market was competitive, I was burning through money I didn't have. But there was one thing Jake hadn't considered, one element his spreadsheet-minded analysis had completely missed. The users I did have were incredibly engaged. They weren't just downloading the app and forgetting about it, they were actively using it, forming real connections, and telling other pet owners about their experiences. Marcus had messaged me just that morning to say his golden retriever was like a different dog since meeting his walking companion. Jennifer's cat was showing confidence she'd never displayed before. David's cattle dog was finally getting the exercise and mental stimulation he needed. These weren't vanity metrics or theoretical success stories. They were real improvements in the lives of both pets and their owners, facilitated by technology I'd built from scratch in my studio apartment. Jake saw 47 users as evidence of failure. I saw 47 proof-of-concept validations that the problem I'd identified was real and my solution was working. The question was, did I have the courage to keep building despite everyone around me insisting I was wasting my time? The email arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was eating cereal at my kitchen counter, scrolling through PetPal user feedback before heading to my day job. The subject line read, "Partnership Inquiry, Denver Pet Expo," and I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam. Instead, I opened it to find a message from Rebecca Martinez, event coordinator for the largest pet expo in Colorado. She'd somehow discovered PetPal through one of my users and wanted to know if I'd be interested in setting up a booth at their upcoming 3-day event. The catch? It would cost $1,500 for the smallest booth space available. I stared at the email for 10 minutes, calculating and recalculating my finances. $1,500 represented nearly half of what remained in my checking account, but the expo drew over 20,000 pet owners from across the Rocky Mountain region. If even 1% of attendees downloaded PetPal, I could triple my user base in a single weekend. The decision terrified me. If the expo was a failure, I'd be facing eviction notices within weeks. But Jake's dismissive speech had crystallized something important. I was either going to commit fully to PetPal or abandon it entirely. Half measures weren't working. I replied to Rebecca within an hour, confirming my participation and requesting the payment instructions. Then, I called in sick to work for the first time in 8 months and spent the entire day planning my expo strategy. The Denver Pet Expo was held at the National Western Complex, a massive venue that normally hosted rodeos and livestock shows. Walking through the exhibitor setup area the Friday before opening day, I felt completely out of my league. Professional pet food companies had elaborate displays with custom lighting and branded merchandise. Tech startups showcased polished presentations on multiple screens. Dog trainers demonstrated their techniques in designated performance areas. My booth consisted of a folding table, 2 laptops, a handful of printed flyers, and a banner I designed and printed at a local copy shop for $40. The whole setup looked amateurish compared to my neighbors, but it was too late to change course. The expo opened Saturday morning at 9, and by 9:30, I was questioning every decision I'd made over the past 4 months.
The crowds were enormous, but most people walked past my booth without stopping. Those who did pause seemed confused by my pitch. It's a social network for pets apparently wasn't as self-explanatory as I'd hoped. By noon, I'd had dozens of conversations, but only 5 app downloads. My voice was getting hoarse, my enthusiasm was flagging, and I was starting to panic about the financial hole I dug myself into. Then Angela Williams stopped by my booth. Angela was in her 50s, impeccably dressed, and radiated the kind of confidence I associated with successful business executives. She examined my banner and materials with the focused attention of someone conducting a professional evaluation. "Tell me about your user retention rates," she said without preamble. I blinked, caught off guard by the technical specificity of her question. Most expo visitors asked basic questions about app functionality or pricing. Angela was clearly operating on a different level. "We're seeing about 75% weekly retention," I replied, pulling up my analytics dashboard. "Monthly retention is around 60%, which I know sounds low, but considering most pet social platforms see 30% monthly retention, I think we're performing well for our user base size." Angela nodded, leaning forward to examine my laptop screen. "What's your customer acquisition cost?" "Currently 0, since we're relying entirely on organic growth and word of mouth," I said. "The $5,000 I've invested so far has gone entirely into development and infrastructure costs." "$5,000?" Angela raised an eyebrow. "That's impressively lean. Most apps I see at this stage have burned through at least $50,000 in development costs alone." I felt a flutter of hope. Angela was asking the kind of questions that suggested genuine interest rather than casual curiosity. "I've been teaching myself development while working full-time," I explained. "It's taken longer than hiring a professional team would have, but it's kept costs manageable." Angela spent the next 20 minutes examining every aspect of PetPal. She created a profile for her rescue beagle, tested the matching algorithm, and even initiated conversations with other users. Her questions were sophisticated: user interface optimization, scalability challenges, competitive differentiation, monetization timelines. "What's your background?" I finally asked. "I'm a managing partner at Rocky's Venture Capital," Angela said casually, as if she were mentioning her favorite coffee shop. "We focus on early-stage consumer technology companies, particularly in underserved markets." My heart started beating faster. I'd researched venture capital firms obsessively, but never imagined I'd encounter a managing partner at a pet expo. "I've been looking for investment opportunities in the pet tech space," Angela continued. "The market is growing rapidly, but most companies are focusing on hardware or basic e-commerce platforms. Social connectivity is underexplored, especially with the quality of matching algorithms you've developed." She handed me her business card, which felt heavier than normal cardstock and featured elegant embossed lettering. "I'd like to schedule a formal presentation meeting. Are you available next Wednesday afternoon?" The rest of Saturday passed in a blur. Word seemed to spread through the expo that a venture capitalist had spent significant time at my booth, and suddenly other attendees were taking PetPal more seriously. By closing time, I'd gained 37 new users and collected contact information from a dozen pet-related businesses interested in potential partnerships. Sunday brought even better results. A local television news crew was filming a segment about innovative pet products, and they included a 2-minute interview with me about PetPal. The reporter asked thoughtful questions about the social challenges facing pet owners, and I felt articulate and confident in my responses for the first time in months. The expo's final day exceeded all my expectations. Not only had I gained over 100 new users, but several established pet businesses had approached me about integration opportunities. A chain of grooming salons wanted to connect their booking system with PetPal. A pet insurance company was interested in offering discounts to active users. A dog training academy saw potential for recommending compatible training partners. More importantly, I'd proven to myself that PetPal addressed a real market need. The enthusiastic responses from pet owners, the genuine excitement about solving social challenges for their animals, and the business interest from established companies validated everything I'd believed about the app's potential. Wednesday's meeting with Angela took place in her firm's downtown Denver offices, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows over the city. I'd spent 3 days preparing a comprehensive presentation covering market analysis, user growth projections, technical architecture, and monetization strategies.
Angela listened intently as I walked through each section, occasionally asking clarifying questions or requesting additional details about specific metrics. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. Norma, I'm impressed with what you've accomplished with minimal resources. Your user engagement metrics are exceptional, your technical execution is solid despite being self-taught, and most importantly, you've identified and begun solving a genuine problem in an expanding market. She paused, and I held my breath. However, venture capital isn't the right fit for PetPal at this stage. You need angel investment first, someone who can provide not just funding, but strategic guidance and industry connections. I'm thinking you need about $200,000 to hire a small development team and expand to additional cities. My heart sank. Angela seemed to notice my disappointment. That's not a rejection, she clarified quickly. It's strategic advice. I have contacts who specialize in exactly this type of early-stage investment. In fact, I know someone who might be perfect for PetPal. He's got experience with consumer social platforms and a particular interest in pet-related businesses. Angela pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. His name is Mark Cuban. The name hit me like a physical blow. Mark Cuban, the billionaire investor from Shark Tank, owner of the Dallas Mavericks, and one of the most recognizable faces in American entrepreneurship. Angela might as well have suggested I pitch to Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. I can see you're overwhelmed, Angela said with an amused smile, but Mark's more accessible than you think, especially for companies that align with his investment philosophy. He particularly likes founders who've bootstrapped their way to proven traction. She explained that Cuban had recently invested in several pet-related businesses and was actively seeking opportunities in underexplored consumer technology markets. More importantly, he responded well to entrepreneurs who could demonstrate genuine problem-solving rather than just theoretical market opportunities. I'm going to make an introduction via email, Angela continued, but I want you to be prepared. Mark moves fast when he's interested. If he likes your initial pitch, he'll want to see comprehensive data immediately. Do you have detailed user analytics, financial projections, and competitive analysis ready? I nodded, though internally I was panicking. My financial projections were basic spreadsheets I'd created during late-night library sessions. My competitive analysis consisted of screenshots and notes I'd scribbled in a notebook. Everything would need to be completely rebuilt to meet the standards of a billionaire investor. Angela sent the introductory email that afternoon while I was still in her office. The subject line read, PetPal, social network for pet owners, exceptional early metrics. She copied me on the message, which positioned PetPal as a unique solution in an underserved market with impressive organic growth and user engagement. Now we wait, Angela said. Mark typically responds within 48 hours if he's interested, or not at all if he's not. The next 36 hours were torture. I called in sick to work again and spent every waking moment rebuilding my presentation materials. I created professional financial models projecting growth scenarios across multiple cities. I developed comprehensive competitive analyses of existing pet platforms and social networks. I even hired a graphic designer on Fiverr to create polished visual elements for $50 I couldn't really afford. The response came at 11:27 p.m. on Thursday, while I was stress-eating leftover pizza and reviewing my presentation for the 100th time. Norma, Angela sent me your pet social network. Interesting concept and solid early numbers. Can you be in Dallas Saturday afternoon for a presentation? Mark. I stared at the email until the words blurred together. Mark Cuban wanted to meet. In Dallas. In 2 days. My first instinct was panic about the cost of last-minute flights, but a quick search revealed tickets for $300 if I booked immediately. It would completely drain my remaining savings, but this was exactly the kind of opportunity Jake insisted would never happen. I booked the flight at midnight and spent Friday in a state of controlled chaos, perfecting my pitch deck and practicing my presentation until I could deliver it without notes. Sarah drove me to the airport Saturday morning, and I could tell she was torn between excitement and worry about my financial situation.
What if he says no? She asked as we pulled up to the departure terminal. Then I'll figure something else out, I replied, though honestly, I had no idea what that something else would be. Cuban's office occupied an entire floor of a downtown Dallas skyscraper, with panoramic views of the city and minimalist decor that screamed expensive simplicity. His assistant, a sharp woman in her 30s, escorted me to a conference room where Mark Cuban was already waiting.
He looked exactly like he did on television, tall, casually dressed in jeans and a polo shirt, with an intensity that was immediately apparent. He gestured for me to sit across from him at a glass table that probably cost more than my annual rent. "So, tell me about PetPal," he said, without preamble. "Angela says you've got something special, but I want to hear it from you." I launched into my presentation, explaining the market problem, demonstrating the app's functionality, and walking through user metrics and growth projections. Cuban listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a legal pad or asking me to repeat specific statistics. When I finished, he leaned back and studied me with the kind of focused attention that made me understand why entrepreneurs found Shark Tank intimidating. "Your user engagement numbers are impressive," he said finally. "75% weekly retention is better than most social platforms achieve, and you're doing it with zero marketing spend. That suggests you've identified a genuine need." I felt a flutter of hope. "But," Cuban continued, "I have concerns about scalability. You've proven the concept works in Denver, but how do you know it will translate to other cities? Pet culture varies significantly across different regions." I'd anticipated this question and pulled up market research I'd compiled about pet ownership patterns across major American cities. The core problems PetPal addresses, social isolation for pets, anxiety around introducing animals, and difficulty finding compatible companions, are consistent across urban markets. The specific solutions might vary, but the underlying needs are universal. Cuban nodded, making more notes. "What about monetization? Angela mentioned you have several revenue strategies, but I want specifics. How do you plan to generate meaningful income without alienating users?" I walked him through my tiered approach. Basic matching services would remain free, but premium features like advanced filtering, professional trainer connections, and event coordination would require subscriptions. Additionally, partnerships with local pet businesses could generate referral revenue without compromising user experience. "The key is maintaining the community-focused nature that makes PetPal valuable," I explained. "Users need to feel like we're facilitating genuine connections, not trying to extract maximum profit from their relationships." Cuban asked increasingly detailed questions about technical architecture, customer acquisition strategies, and competitive threats. Each answer seemed to generate two new questions, and I found myself drawing on every piece of research I'd conducted over the past 5 months. An hour into the meeting, Cuban's demeanor shifted. The formal interview atmosphere gave way to something more collaborative, as if he was already thinking about PetPal as an investment rather than evaluating whether it merited consideration. "Here's what I like," he said, standing up and walking to the windows overlooking downtown Dallas. "You've identified a real problem, built a working solution with minimal resources, and proven that users will engage consistently with your platform. Most importantly, you understand your market intimately because you're part of it." He turned back toward me, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind. "Here's what concerns me. You're a solo founder with limited technical background trying to scale a complex social platform. That's not necessarily a deal breaker, but it means you'll need to build a team quickly and delegate effectively." Cuban returned to his seat and opened a leather portfolio I hadn't noticed before. "I'm prepared to make you an offer," he said, "but I want to be clear about my expectations. This isn't just about money. I'm investing in your vision and your ability to execute at a much larger scale." My heart was beating so hard I worried he could hear it across the table. "I'll invest $15 million for 35% equity in PetPal. The funding will support team expansion, multi-city rollout, and marketing initiatives. But more importantly, you'll have access to my network, my experience with scaling consumer platforms, and my guidance on strategic decisions." The numbers hit me like a physical force. $15 million. More money than I'd ever imagined having access to.
enough to hire a full development team, launch in dozens of cities, and build PetPal into the comprehensive platform I'd envisioned during those late nights in the Denver Public Library. I need to think about it, I heard myself saying, though every rational part of my brain was screaming to accept immediately. Cuban smiled. Smart response. Never make major decisions under pressure. Take the weekend to consider the terms, talk to Angela, maybe consult with a lawyer, but I'll need an answer by Monday.
As I left his office building and walked through downtown Dallas, I felt simultaneously exhilarated and terrified. Everything I'd worked toward, everything Jake had insisted was impossible, was suddenly within reach. But accepting Cuban's offer would mean committing to a level of growth and responsibility that seemed almost overwhelming. PetPal wouldn't be my small-scale passion project anymore. It would become a major business with employees, investors, and expectations that extended far beyond my studio apartment in Denver. The flight back to Denver felt surreal. I stared out the airplane window at the Texas landscape shrinking below, trying to process what had just happened. $15 million. The number kept echoing in my mind like a mantra I couldn't quite believe. I'd brought a notebook to work on potential counterproposals during the flight, but instead found myself sketching wireframes for features I'd never been able to afford developing. A comprehensive vet directory integrated with user profiles, real-time GPS tracking for safe meetups, professional behavior assessment tools. With Cuban's funding, everything I dreamed about for PetPal could become reality within months. But doubt crept in as the plane descended toward Denver International Airport. What if I wasn't ready for this level of responsibility? What if I made critical mistakes that cost Cuban millions? What if PetPal's success in Denver was just beginner's luck that wouldn't translate to national markets? Sarah picked me up from the airport, and I spent the entire drive home walking her through every detail of the meeting. She listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but I could see the excitement building in her expression. "Norma, this is incredible," she said as we pulled into my apartment complex. "Mark Cuban doesn't invest $15 million on a whim. He sees something special in PetPal." That night, I called Angela to discuss Cuban's offer. She walked me through the equity terms, explaining that 35% was aggressive but not unreasonable for the funding level and strategic value he was providing. "The key question," Angela said, "is whether you're prepared for what comes next. Mark's investment will transform PetPal from a startup into a high-growth company with serious expectations. Are you ready to hire employees, manage larger budgets, and make decisions that affect millions of users?" I spent most of Sunday walking Rex through Washington Park, the same route where the original PetPal idea had occurred to me 6 months earlier. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was contemplating a life-changing business decision while doing the exact activity that had inspired the app in the first place. Rex seemed to sense my mental state and stayed close, occasionally nudging my hand when I stopped walking to think. At one point, we encountered Luna and her owner at our usual meetup spot. Watching the two dogs play together, completely comfortable and happy in each other's company, reminded me why PetPal mattered beyond financial metrics and growth projections. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching my conflicted mood. I'd decided to accept Cuban's offer, but calling him back felt like crossing a threshold I couldn't uncross. Once I said yes, my quiet life of library coding sessions and small-scale user growth would be over forever. I made the call at 10 a.m. Denver time, which was noon in Dallas. "Mark, it's Norma Wilson from PetPal. I've had the weekend to consider your offer, and I'd like to accept the terms we discussed." "Outstanding," Cuban replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "My legal team will send over the paperwork this afternoon. We'll need to schedule a signing meeting, probably in Dallas again, but I'm thinking we can have everything finalized within 2 weeks." The conversation lasted another 10 minutes as we discussed immediate next steps, hiring priorities, office space requirements, and timeline expectations for the multi-city rollout. Cuban was already thinking several moves ahead, mentioning potential partnerships and growth strategies I hadn't even considered. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop screen, which still displayed the basic PetPal dashboard I'd been working on for months. In a few weeks, this simple interface would be the foundation for a multi-million-dollar company.
The transformation felt impossible to comprehend. I needed to tell my family, but I dreaded the conversation with my parents. They'd worry about the pressure and responsibility, asking careful questions about whether I was prepared for such a dramatic change. Their concern would be loving but exhausting to navigate. Jake's reaction would be entirely different and potentially more challenging. His condescending dismissal of Pet Pal had been so absolute, so confident in its correctness, that Cuban's investment would force him to confront the possibility that his business judgment wasn't as sophisticated as he believed. I decided to call Jake first, ripping off the Band-Aid before I lost my nerve. "Hey, Norma," he answered on the second ring. "How's the pet app hobby going? Still trying to revolutionize dog playdates?" The casual mockery in his tone made my response even more satisfying.
Actually, Jake, I'm calling with some news about Pet Pal. I just accepted an investment offer from Mark Cuban for $15 million. Dead silence. I counted 5 full seconds before Jake responded. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" Mark Cuban invested $15 million in Pet Pal. We're signing the paperwork next week. More silence. I could practically hear Jake's mental gears grinding as he processed information that didn't fit his worldview. "You're serious?" he said finally, his tone completely different from the beginning of the conversation. "Dead serious. I flew to Dallas Saturday to pitch him, and he made the offer on the spot." More silence. I could practically hear Jake's mental gears grinding as he processed information that didn't fit his worldview. "You're serious?" he said finally, his tone completely different from the beginning of the conversation. "Dead serious. I flew to Dallas Saturday to pitch him, and he made the offer on the spot." Jake's response revealed everything about how thoroughly his assumptions had been shattered. Mark Cuban, the guy from Shark Tank, invested $15 million in your pet app. In Pet Pal, yes. I heard him take a deep breath, clearly struggling to recalibrate his understanding of the situation. "Norma, honestly, I don't know what to say. This is incredible. How did you even get in front of someone like Mark Cuban?" I walked him through the sequence of events: the pet expo, meeting Angela, the introduction email, and the Dallas presentation. With each detail, I could hear Jake's amazement growing, along with what sounded like genuine respect for the first time in our adult relationship. "I have to admit," Jake said when I finished, "I completely misjudged Pet Pal's potential. I was so focused on the limitations I saw that I missed the value you were creating. This is huge, Norma." His admission felt more validating than Cuban's investment offer. Jake had been the harshest critic of my entrepreneurial ambitions, and hearing him acknowledge his mistake was profoundly satisfying. "I owe you an apology," Jake continued, "and not just for doubting the app, but for the way I talked to you about it. I was condescending and dismissive when I should have been supportive. You were right to keep building despite everyone telling you it wouldn't work." The conversation lasted another hour as Jake asked detailed questions about Cuban's investment terms, my expansion plans, and the technical challenges of scaling Pet Pal nationally. His questions were thoughtful and genuinely curious, a stark contrast to his previous skepticism. "So what happens next?" he asked as we were wrapping up. "I'm hiring a development team, opening a real office, and launching Pet Pal in 5 new cities within the next 4 months. Mark wants to see rapid growth, and I think we can deliver it." "Do you need any help with the business side? I know I was an ass about Pet Pal before, but I do have experience with scaling operations and managing growth." The offer surprised me. 6 months ago, Jake's involvement would have felt like validation I desperately needed. Now, with Cuban's backing and my confidence firmly established, I could consider his help objectively rather than emotionally. "I might take you up on that," I replied. "I'll definitely need experienced people around me, and despite our disagreements, you do know how to grow businesses." After we hung up, I called my parents. Their reaction was everything I'd expected.
excitement mixed with concern, pride tempered by worry about the challenges ahead. My mother immediately started asking questions about health insurance and retirement planning, while my father wanted to understand the legal implications of giving up equity. But their underlying message was clear. They were proud of what I'd accomplished and confident I could handle whatever came next. As evening approached, I walked Rex through the neighborhood one more time, knowing it might be one of our last quiet walks before PetPal transformed my life entirely. The app that had started as a solution to Rex's social struggles was about to become a national platform serving hundreds of thousands of pets and their owners. The scared, broke graphic designer who'd spent nights coding in the Denver Public Library was about to become the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. And my brother Jake, who'd laughed so hard at my stupid app idea that he'd fallen off his chair, had just apologized and offered to help me build something extraordinary. Sometimes, the best revenge really is massive success. 6 months after signing with Mark Cuban, I stood in PetPal's new headquarters in downtown Denver, watching my team of 12 employees collaborate on features I'd only dreamed about during those late-night library sessions. The 8,000-square-foot office space featured an open floor plan, dedicated testing areas for app functionality, and even a small dog run on the roof where employees could bring their pets to work. Our user Binto, Portland, Seattle, Austin, Nashville, and Phoenix, exceeding even Cuban's aggressive growth projections. The matching algorithm had been refined by professional developers who understood machine learning in ways I never could, and the user interface had been completely redesigned by a team of UX specialists. But the most satisfying transformation wasn't the office space or user metrics. It was watching real communities form around PetPal's platform. In Chicago, a group of senior dog owners had created a weekly walking club through the app. Austin's cat owners were organizing indoor playdate sessions during the hot summer months. Seattle's usage had exploded to over 180,000 active users across 15 cities. With expansion, hiking enthusiasts had formed adventure groups for high-energy dogs who needed mountain trail exercise. The monetization strategies I'd outlined to Cuban were proving successful beyond our initial projections. Premium subscriptions, which included advanced matching filters and priority customer support, had been adopted by nearly 30% of active users. Partnership agreements with veterinary clinics, pet stores, and training facilities were generating significant referral revenue while providing genuine value to our community. More importantly, PetPal was solving the problem that had inspired its creation. Pet owners were reporting reduced anxiety about socialization, decreased behavioral issues in their animals, and stronger connections within their local communities. The app had evolved into something larger than a simple matching service. It had become infrastructure for pet-centered social networks in major cities across America. Cuban's involvement extended far beyond his financial investment. He participated in monthly strategy meetings, provided introductions to potential partners, and offered guidance on scaling challenges I hadn't anticipated. His experience with consumer-facing platforms proved invaluable when we encountered technical bottlenecks and user acquisition obstacles. The key to sustainable growth, Cuban had told me during one of our strategy sessions, is maintaining the community feel that made PetPal special in Denver while building systems that can serve millions of users nationwide. That balance between intimate community and scalable technology defined every decision we made. New features had to enhance genuine connections rather than just increase engagement metrics. Expansion into additional cities required local community managers who understood regional pet culture differences. Even our marketing campaigns focused on real user stories rather than generic social media advertising. Jake had become one of our most valuable advisors, joining our board as Director of Business Development. His corporate experience proved essential when negotiating partnership agreements and managing vendor relationships. More importantly, his initial skepticism about PetPal's viability made him an effective devil's advocate during strategic planning sessions. "I still can't believe I called this the dumbest idea I'd ever seen," Jake admitted during a family dinner celebrating PetPal's first anniversary. "It's taught me to be much more careful about dismissing ideas that fall outside my personal experience." The transformation in our relationship had been one of the unexpected benefits of PetPal's success. Jake's respect for my entrepreneurial instincts had evolved into genuine collaboration, and his business acumen had become genuinely helpful rather than condescendingly critical. My parents had struggled more with the rapid changes in my life. The daughter who'd been barely making rent 12 months earlier was now managing multi-million-dollar budgets and making decisions that affected hundreds of employees and thousands of users. They worried about the pressure and responsibility, even as they celebrated my success. "I'm proud of what you've built," my mother said during one of our weekly phone calls, "but I miss the quiet evenings when you'd visit and we'd just talk about normal things. Now every conversation seems to be about expansion plans and investment rounds." She wasn't wrong. The demands of scaling PetPal had consumed most of my personal time and mental energy. Even walking Rex had become opportunities to test new app features or brainstorm solutions to user experience challenges. But the work felt meaningful in ways my previous graphic design job never had. Every positive user review, every successful pet friendship formed through our platform, and every community event organized via PetPal reinforced that we were creating genuine value rather than just another social media distraction. The second round of funding had come easier than I'd expected. With proven user growth, clear revenue streams, and Cuban's endorsement, venture capital firms were actively competing to participate in PetPal's Series A round. We ultimately raised an additional $25 million from a consortium led by Angela's firm, Rocky's Venture Capital. "It's remarkable how different this process feels compared to 18 months ago," Angela observed during the Series A signing ceremony. "Back then, you were hoping someone would take a chance on your idea. Now, investors are hoping you'll take a chance on them." The new funding enabled expansion into 20 additional cities, international pilot programs in Canada and the UK, and development of advanced features like AI-powered behavioral matching and integrated veterinary care coordination. PetPal was evolving from a social network into a comprehensive platform serving every aspect of pet ownership. Recognition from the broader tech industry had followed our growth trajectory. PetPal was featured on the cover of TechCrunch as one of the year's most innovative consumer platforms. I'd been invited to speak at major conferences about scaling niche social networks and building community-focused technology companies. The speaking engagements were simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. Standing on stage in front of hundreds of entrepreneurs and investors, sharing the story of PetPal's development felt surreal given that I'd been coding alone in a public library less than 2 years earlier. "The most important lesson I've learned," I told an audience at South by Southwest, "is that market size matters less than problem authenticity. PetPal succeeded because we solved a real problem that affected millions of people, not because we identified a large theoretical market opportunity." The presentation included slides showing PetPal's growth trajectory, user engagement metrics, and revenue projections, but the questions afterward focused primarily on the early development process and my experience as a solo founder. "How did you maintain confidence in PetPal when everyone around you was skeptical?" asked a young entrepreneur from the audience. "Honestly, I didn't always maintain confidence," I replied. "There were moments when the criticism felt overwhelming and I seriously considered abandoning the project. But the users I did have were so engaged and enthusiastic that I couldn't ignore the validation their feedback provided." After the conference, I received dozens of emails from aspiring entrepreneurs working on their own projects despite skepticism from family and friends. Reading their stories reminded me of those lonely nights in the Denver Public Library, wondering if I was wasting my time on an idea that would never gain traction. Rex had become something of a celebrity within the PetPal community, featured in marketing materials as the original inspiration for the platform. His social circle had expanded dramatically. He now had regular playmates across Denver and had even been invited to PetPal meetup events in other cities when I traveled for business. "Rex is probably the most well-connected dog in America at this point," Sarah joked during one of our monthly catch-up dinners. "He's got friends in 15 cities and a higher social media following than most influencers." The observation wasn't entirely inaccurate. PetPal's official social media accounts regularly featured Rex's adventures with other users' pets, and his story had been included in several major media profiles about the company. Looking back at the journey from that first frustrated walk in Washington Park to managing a multi-million-dollar company serving hundreds of thousands of users, the transformation felt both gradual and sudden. Each day had brought small challenges and incremental progress, but the cumulative effect had been revolutionary. The scared graphic designer who'd been afraid to spend $1,500 on a pet expo booth had become a CEO comfortable making decisions involving millions of dollars and hundreds of employees. The woman whose brother had mocked her stupid app idea was now running a company that Mark Cuban considered one of his most successful investments. But perhaps most importantly, Rex had more friends than he could possibly play with in a single week, which had been the original goal all along. 2 years after that first mocking laugh from Jake, I found myself sitting in a green room at the Shark Tank studio in Los Angeles, preparing to appear as a guest expert alongside Mark Cuban. The producers had invited me to share PetPal's story during an episode focused on consumer technology startups, and Cuban had specifically requested that I join him on the panel. "It's surreal being back here," Cuban said as we waited for filming to begin. "When I first invested in PetPal, I knew it had potential, but even I underestimated how quickly you'd scale the platform and build genuine community engagement." PetPal had just crossed the million-user milestone, with active communities in 47 cities across North America and pilot programs launching in London, Toronto, and Sydney. The international expansion had required navigating completely different regulatory environments and cultural attitudes toward pet ownership, but the core value proposition remained universal. The revenue numbers were staggering compared to my early projections. Annual recurring revenue had reached $12 million, with premium subscriptions, business partnerships, and transaction fees creating multiple income streams that complemented rather than competed with each other. Cuban's initial investment had already generated returns that exceeded his most optimistic scenarios. But the metrics that mattered most to me weren't financial. PetPal had facilitated over 2.3 million successful pet connections, from casual playground meetups to lifelong companionships. The platform had spawned thousands of local pet communities, organized charity events that raised over $800,000 for animal shelters, and even led to several human marriages between owners who met through their pets' friendships. The ripple effects extended beyond individual pet relationships. Veterinarians reported that pets using PetPal showed reduced anxiety and behavioral problems. Animal shelters partnered with us to help newly adopted pets integrate into social environments more effectively. Dog trainers used our platform to create specialized groups for pets with similar behavioral challenges or training needs. Jake had exceeded everyone's expectations in his role as Director of Business Development. His initial skepticism had evolved into sophisticated strategic thinking about market expansion and partnership opportunities. He spearheaded our integration with major pet insurance companies, negotiated our partnership with the largest veterinary chain in North America, and identified acquisition targets that could accelerate our international growth. I've learned more about entrepreneurship from watching Norma build PetPal than I did in 15 years of corporate sales, Jake admitted during a recent team meeting. The willingness to pursue an idea that everyone else thinks is impossible, that's a skill you can't teach in business school. His transformation has become one of my favorite aspects of PetPal's success story. The brother who dismissed my app as the dumbest thing he'd ever seen was now one of its most effective advocates, using his credibility with traditional business leaders to open doors that might otherwise remain closed to a pet-focused technology company. My parents had finally adjusted to their daughter's unexpected prominence in the tech world. They'd attended the TechCrunch Disrupt conference, where I'd been a keynote speaker, watched me appear on multiple business news programs, and even started using PetPal themselves after adopting a senior golden retriever named Charlie, who needed gentle companionship. "I still don't understand most of the technical details," my father confessed, after watching me demonstrate new features during a family gathering. "But I understand that you've built something that makes a real difference in people's lives. That's what matters." The validation from my family felt more meaningful than industry awards or media recognition. These were the people who'd watched me struggle through those early months of doubt and financial stress, and their pride in what PetPal had become carried emotional weight that no external accolade could match. The day before the Shark Tank filming, I'd received a handwritten letter from Eleanor Patterson, an 83-year-old woman in Phoenix whose ancient Pomeranian had found companionship through PetPal after years of isolation following her husband's death. She described how the weekly playdate group organized through our platform had become the highlight of both her and her dog's week, providing social connection that extended far beyond pet interaction. Your app didn't just help my Duchess make friends, Eleanor wrote. It helped me realize I wasn't alone in this city. The other dog owners in our group have become some of my closest friends, and it all started because the Duchess needed someone to play with. Stories like Eleanor's reminded me why PetPal mattered beyond valuation metrics and growth projections. We'd built technology that addressed fundamental human needs for community and connection, using pets as the catalyst for relationships that enriched entire lives. The Shark Tank episode showcased 3 entrepreneurs pitching pet-related businesses to the investor panel. As Cuban and I evaluated their presentations, I found myself thinking about my own nervous pitch in his Dallas office 24 months earlier. The entrepreneurs were making similar mistakes I'd made, focusing too heavily on technical features rather than user benefits, underestimating market size, overcomplicating their revenue strategies. The biggest challenge for pet tech companies, I told the panel during our discussion segment, is remembering that you're solving human problems through pet solutions. Pet owners don't want more complexity in their lives, they want tools that make pet ownership more enjoyable and less stressful. One of the pitching entrepreneurs had developed a sophisticated GPS tracking collar with biometric monitoring capabilities, but struggled to articulate why pet owners needed such detailed health data. Another had created an elaborate automated feeding system that required smartphone programming for basic operations. Technology should disappear into the background, Cuban added, reinforcing my point. The best consumer products solve problems so elegantly that users barely notice the technology itself. PetPal succeeded because it focused on the outcome, helping pets make friends rather than showcasing technical complexity. After filming wrapped, Cuban and I discussed PetPal's next phase of growth. The Series B funding round was approaching, with preliminary interest from major venture capital firms and strategic investors who saw potential for international expansion and adjacent market opportunities.
I'm thinking we should consider acquisition offers seriously, Cuban suggested as we walked through the studio lot. You've built something special, but the next level of growth might require resources and infrastructure that independent development can't provide efficiently. The conversation had been building for months. Several major technology companies had expressed interest in acquiring PetPal, offering valuations that would make everyone involved extremely wealthy. Google wanted to integrate our social features into their broader ecosystem. Amazon saw synergies with their pet supply commerce platform. Facebook believed PetPal could become a cornerstone of their community-focused strategy. But accepting an acquisition offer would mean giving up control over PetPal's direction and potentially compromising the community-focused values that had made the platform successful. Large technology companies had different priorities, and I worried about maintaining the intimate, trust-based culture that differentiated PetPal from generic social networks. The decision isn't just about money, I told Cuban. It's about whether we can continue serving our users' best interests while operating within a larger corporate structure. On the flight back to Denver, I opened my laptop and scrolled through recent user messages and community updates. A military family had used PetPal to maintain their dog's social connections during a cross-country move. College students were coordinating pet care support networks during exam periods. Senior communities were organizing intergenerational programs where elderly residents shared their pets with younger families who couldn't afford pet ownership. These connections happened organically through PetPal's platform, without corporate initiatives or marketing campaigns driving their development. The community had evolved beyond our original vision, creating value that couldn't be quantified through traditional business metrics. Rex, now 4 years old and significantly more social than during our early Washington Park walks, had inspired a platform serving over 1 million pets and their families. The anxious rescue pit bull who'd struggled to make friends had become the catalyst for communities spanning multiple continents. As we descended into Denver, I looked out at the city where PetPal had begun and made my decision about the acquisition offers. We'd continue building independently, maintaining control over our community's experience and values. The financial rewards would come eventually, but the mission of connecting pets and their families was too important to compromise for short-term profits.
Some ideas really are worth pursuing, even when everyone around you insists they're impossible. Sometimes the best validation comes not from proving skeptics wrong, but from building something that makes the world a little bit better for the people who need it most. And sometimes, the dumbest idea your brother has ever heard becomes the foundation for changing millions of lives. Looking for more? We've got two amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.